Hello, Kathryn. How are you doing today?
Good morning. I'm doing fine, thank you.
This is Tasdiq Numaira Alam, the Assistant Editor of Insight ELC, Taibah University. Welcome to KSA.
Thank you so much.
Well, Kathryn, we have a few questions for you today. Should we start?
Absolutely.
This is the first time that you are visiting KSA and its academia. So what's your overall experience here?
I've had an incredibly wonderful initial experience. I've had the opportunity to go to several post-secondary institutions, to the universities in the area, and I've been so impressed. I've been impressed with the warm welcome I've received. I've been impressed with the quality of the teaching that's already in place. And I've been especially impressed with the teachers' willingness to take new ideas in, absorb them, contemplate how they might apply to their own teaching situation, and to go right out and try them. I think there's an incredible appetite in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for new ideas that might work and might move forward the English language teaching, and it's really exciting to have even a small part of that, so I'm very grateful to be here.
Well, Kathryn, from your wide experience as an ELT specialist, what do you believe are the key elements that guarantee success to preparatory year English language teachers?
I think the preparatory year is an opportunity for students to move from English that's not been activated, that they've learned relatively passively in their high school years, to English that they can use to grasp academic ideas and to express academic ideas. So I think it's incredibly important in the preparatory year that teachers have a big vision, right? They shouldn't limit themselves. They should think, I can take these students in 1 year from a very limited use of English to an ability to go and listen to academic lectures, to participate in academic discussions, and to start to write academic papers and academic writing. So I think that the teacher's ambition has to be huge, right? They have to go in there and think, I'm activating English. I've got to get these students involved. I've got to get them processing quickly. I've got to do everything I can so the student has large amounts of important and salient data that's interesting to the student, that the student starts to notice how English functions differently from their first language. They need to start to gather vocabulary, like in baskets of it, so that they've got a huge collection that they can experiment with and try and use. And I think the teacher's role is so incredibly important there because the students are scared and nervous when they begin their journey. And so that rapport building, the teacher as a trusted guide, the teacher providing data and helping them to notice the data, and then giving them so many opportunities to experiment, to use it in a supportive environment. I think if you do that for the year, at the end of that time, many individuals are able to have a very strong level of English to move forward with.
Wow, that's excellent. Thanks.
You're very welcome.
Kathryn, we know that you worked as a teacher trainer as well. According to you, what are the skills should a teacher trainer follow?
I think it's an honor to be a teacher trainer. I think that the teacher trainer needs to understand that by impacting one teacher, they impact students for dozens of years. So it's an incredibly honorable role, and I think in order to do it successfully, the teacher trainer needs to keep up with the research. So I'm always going online to the library at my institution, and I'm looking for recent research and trying to activate my brain again to think, oh, I remember how exciting it was when I was first starting my teaching journey or in the middle of my teaching journey to find out something new. So I think the teacher trainer introduces new theories, but carefully vets those theories and helps them to tie into what teachers may have been doing already, because sudden jumps are always dangerous and tricky. You can fall. So the teacher trainer understands the history of English language teaching. They add to that the new ideas and the new research. There's a lot out there right now related to neurolinguistics and how the brain operates. And then they help the classroom teacher to imagine themselves doing something different in the class, and then they support them as they go and implement it. So I think that it's an exciting role because teachers come back and they say, oh, I tried this in the class. Even in my time here in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, I've had teachers come back and say, I tried what you were suggesting in the class and it worked. And I think that that's the biggest excitement of being a trainer. So I think a good understanding of the literature, a good understanding of classroom practice, tied to an interest in the current thinking in the field can make for a strong teacher trainer.
Have you ever faced any difficulties as teacher trainer? How did you overcome with that?
I think one of the biggest difficulties for a teacher trainer is making sure they understand the context in which the teachers that you're training are going to be teaching. So even within Canada, we have teachers teaching very, very academic English for entry to university. We have teachers teaching more introductory English classes at a very beginner level. And when I came here to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, I was a little bit nervous that I wouldn't be able to transfer my knowledge of English language teaching into the context here. So I was very cautious at the beginning to develop an understanding of the teaching context here so that things could match up. And of course I'm still at the beginning stage of my understanding, but I think that is the biggest, probably the biggest challenge for a teacher trainer, is to be able to appreciate the context into which those teachers are going so that there can be a match. Because there's no use spending your time learning about new theories and learning about new ideas for teaching if there's too big a gap between those theories and those ideas and the environment in which the teacher is going to be teaching. So I think the teacher trainer serves as a bridge between those two areas, and therefore it's absolutely essential to understand the context.
That's very good. Kathryn, your major interest is in the impact of pronunciation and paralinguistic features on the learning. Give us some ideas in this field.
Yeah, I've been interested for a long time in how we can activate people's English. So my experience was that a lot of people come into English language classes having taken passive English language learning prior to entering my classes, for example. So they've studied in high school or they've taken some classes. And then they would come into my classes and they wouldn't feel the English. And my question to myself was, how can you help people to really feel the English, to really appreciate the difference it might have from the first language? And I found that the biggest windows were pronunciation and nonverbal cues, or the paralinguistics, for example, the intonation. And so I read the literature in those areas, and in fact in my master's was really interested in the issue of why teachers don't teach more pronunciation, why they don't teach more paralinguistics. And what I found was teachers don't know enough about it themselves, so they're not able to implement that in the class. But what my finding is that in L1 acquisition, our biggest focus as infants in the parents' arms are the sound of the voices around us, the sound of the movements around us. And we develop a template for our first language. And then as we're born and we're growing up, our parents display for us, first of all, the finest aspects of our first language, you know, all of the intonation, all of the pronunciation, all of the words directed at the beloved infant are very positive. And then when that child gets to be about 18 months old, the parents demonstrate a different style of language, which is usually be careful, don't touch that, etc. And what I found in observing numerous second language classrooms is that many teachers stay in what I would call kind of the dead zone. They stay in an area where people are kind and polite and producing English, and all of the materials are kind and polite and representing English, but they're not representing the whole spectrum of English. And so the student's brain doesn't get a window into how that language functions. How do you express negativity in that language? How do you express positivity? What is a neutral, pleasant-sounding English? Because usually they only hear the neutral, pleasant-sounding English. So I started to experiment in my classrooms with not being mean to my students, but with showing them how English would sound in different environments and the variety in the repertoire that a native speaker has. And I found that that really woke students up. Then I looked at the research that we process nonverbal cues milliseconds before we process the verbal cue. So I started to think, if I'm teaching, for example, pronunciation, and the student's having a problem with aspirating the initial consonant p, what if I add a nonverbal gesture like p, and every time that word comes up, the student sees the gesture just before I'm reminding them to make the sound? Would that activate their understanding of that concept? And I found that absolutely it did. So I tend to tie a nonverbal cue with a verbal understanding of the wide range that could be used on intonation and on tone of voice. And I find that students will grasp vocabulary more quickly, they'll grasp chunks of language more quickly, and there's a sudden and very impressive improvement in their listening skills and their speaking skills, and interestingly enough, in their ability to scan and skim a reading passage.
Thank you. As we know, your research was in why ESL teachers don't teach more pronunciation. Please tell us something about your findings.
Yeah, I really wanted to understand why pronunciation wasn't a focus in the second language classroom. So I looked at a group of experienced teachers and a group of new teachers coming into the field. And what I found was that experienced teachers mainly didn't include pronunciation because they didn't know enough about pronunciation. So when they were asked to define terms, they weren't familiar with those terms, and when they were asked why they didn't include more pronunciation, it was mostly really because they couldn't teach what they didn't know about themselves. And so there was a great willingness on the part of both experienced teachers and new teachers to second language teaching to include pronunciation. But they needed a bigger emphasis either in their initial teacher training or in terms of professional development on an ongoing basis. And then once they were introduced to the concepts of pronunciation teaching, they realized that it wasn't just about vowels and consonants or small segmental levels, but it was about the whole music of the language, the prosody, the suprasegmentals, how we sound when we present ourselves to the world. And the teachers became very excited about including that emphasis in their teaching. And many teachers reported back that they could see this as a window for helping students to better understand how English functions in general, and that it also helped them in their own mind to better understand how English functions. So I think on the basis of those initial findings, it would be wonderful if we had more research in the area of pronunciation teaching and how it can add to the efficacy of second language teaching worldwide.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Kathryn, we know that you have written materials as second language teaching and co-authored Pearson Longman's Writing for Results. That was really great. Please share some of the interesting topics that you have covered in the book.
So that was an academic writing book, or a book that was designed to bring students from a very basic level of writing at the paragraph level to an ability to write in a variety of academic and workplace genres. So the book has examples both from technical writing and from business type writing. And it's very much a developmental approach to language writing, with the recognition that students need to have a template in their brain for how English functions in terms of writing. So it doesn't focus only on formulas, it focuses on how that formula can give you a starting place to be a little bit creative in the writing process, to add an understanding of your own style and your own interests to the expectations of the workplace. So I think it's a very nice balance between an academic approach and a process writing approach to the development of writing, and that by allowing students to choose whether their interests are more technical or more business oriented, the book gives the student options in a number of activities and a number of looks at the writing process.
Kathryn, it was wonderful interviewing you. Thank you so much for your time. I wish you a safe journey back in Canada.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to have been here, and I think with all really good teaching situations, the teacher learns as much as the student, and I've learned so much here. So thank you very much.
Hope to see you again in Saudi Arabia.
I hope so too. Thank you.